Welcome to everyone tonight. Thank you for joining us. My name is Cindy Domingo, and I'm with two organizations that are co-sponsoring this event tonight. I'm the chair of board of LILO, A Legacy of Equality, Leadership, and Organizing. And I'm also in the leadership of the Seattle chapter of Asian Pacific American Labor Alliance. And I want to welcome you tonight, and especially because this month is Filipino American History Month. And I do want to acknowledge the two sponsors that made this possible, the UW Tacoma Labor Solidarity Project and UW Harry Bridges Center for Labor Studies. And without them, this wouldn't be possible. In February this year, when Union by Law first came out, we did a book event, but we knew that we wanted to do a book event during October, given the topic of this book, the relevancy to the book to the Filipino community. And October is Filipino American History Month. And so I want to thank Alex Miller with the UW Tacoma Labor Solidarity Project and Andrew Hedden with the Harry Bridges Labor Center for helping to organize this. Now, many people know that October is Filipino American History Month, but it was first declared in October 1992 by the Filipino American National Historical Society that has its headquarters here in Seattle. And it was recognized by US Congress in 2009. And it is now recognized in many government jurisdictions throughout the United States and has resulted in many forums and discussions, especially during this month of Filipino American National History Month. Last weekend, I went to the Tacoma Art Museum to see the Kinsey collection on African American art and history, a collection in part that is meant to further educate the public about slavery, racial capitalism, as well as the contributions of African Americans to history, culture, education, and art. And in that collection, there was a section entitled The Myth of Absence. And while written to reflect the Black experience, it could be translated to reflect the experiences of people of color and Filipinos, Filipino Americans. And Lerone Bennett Jr. wrote, "In American history, as in American life, Black Americans are invisible presences. They are not seen, not because of their absence, but because of the presence of a myth that prepares and requires their absence. The myth of absence, which expresses this idea and intention, operates not by misinterpretation, not by slander, but by silence and exclusion." Bennett goes on to say that the manipulators of this myth then can control the color of the past, perceptions, and acts in the presence. And it is because we live in this myth of absence that Michael McCann and George Lavelle's book is so important. Important because even though Filipinos have been part of American history since the turn of the 20th century, and actually even before that, our own Filipino community, much less in the wider American communities, our history is unknown, much less in the wider and especially our contributions to the struggle for human and civil rights, and thus our contributions to building participatory democracy in the United States. And that's why I'm so grateful that Michael McCann and George Lavelle have written this book and are so willing to share their knowledge, to base the book based on our stories, because it's important that our stories are told. And that's what's meant by decolonizing education, is if we can get our stories told. I also want to thank, once again, Michael and George for dedicating their book to the legacy of Salmi Domingo and Jean Bernas. Salmi was my brother, and although it's been 40 years since their assassinations, their legacy continues on. The dedication says, Salmi and Domingo and Jean Verdes, whose struggles for social justice have so inspired us and many others, end quote. And so once again, this assassinations of Salmi and Jean, their work as radical activists and the organizations and social movements they participated and led are such an important part of this book and such an important part of the history of radical Filipinos and activists in this country and those that dared to build international solidarity that we continue to build today, especially with the movement in the Philippines. So I want to thank you again for coming today. And, I just want to say personally, this book means a lot to me, not only because it talks about Salmi and Jean, but also because I come from 3 generations of cannery workers. My father was a cannery worker in agricultural work from the 1920s when he immigrated to the 1940s. And tonight you will hear stories from Emma Catague and from Mario Vergara, who are immigrants to this country, and their struggles as cannery workers and how that influenced their lives. But before we get to those stories, I'm going to turn to Michael McCann so that he can talk about his book. Michael McCann, and would take me all night to tell you about Michael's accomplishments, but just in brief, Michael is the Gordon Hirabayashi Professor for the Advancement of Citizenship at the UW and has served as chair of the Political Science Department during various periods of his career, as well as chair of the Harry Bridges Center for Labor Studies. He's one of the leading architects and advocate for the Law, Societies, and Justice program, as well as the Comparative Law and Society Study Center, both committed to the study of social justice and human rights. I believe it was this background and his research focus on the politics of rights-based struggles for social justice, with an emphasis on challenges to race, gender, and class hierarchies that led him to us and the other cannery workers that have labored for so long and continue to labor in Alaska in the canneries. So, Michael, please.
Thank you, Cindy, for that very gracious and generous introduction. I am extremely honored and pleased to be here and to be part of this event. It's quite humbling in a variety of ways. And of course, I'm happy to talk about the book, but which is really a book about the history of the Filipino American labor struggles against racial capitalism. I also want to reiterate the thanks to Alex Miller for putting these series together. The Labor Solidarity Project and working together is a terrific series. I've already attended one and plan to attend a lot more this fall. I hope the rest of you do as well. I also want to thank my colleagues at the Harry Bridges Center for Labor Studies. And of course, to Cindy, it's always an honor to be anywhere on a stage or even a virtual stage with Cindy, and also with Emma and with Mario. Okay, so I'm going to do a PowerPoint, and the hope is that you get to see pictures, which is probably better than just listening to me. Everybody see that? We're good? Okay. This is the book, Union by Law, Filipino American Labor Activists, Rights Radicalism and Racial Capitalism. It's co-authored with George Lovell. That's a long story, why it's not an equal pairing, but nevertheless, he was a very important colleague and intellectual force in the development of this book. Okay, the book begins with the Supreme Court and with a case that the Supreme Court heard in 1989, a case that had wound its way through the courts since 1974. And it was a case of Filipino American labor activists along with other groups, indigenous Alaskans, challenging the long history of racial discrimination and segregation in the salmon canneries in Alaska. Rusesina said of this, he goes, there's an unspoken rule, basically the Filipinos are not allowed. And by that he meant they're not allowed to apply for the better jobs. They're not allowed in the spaces that are reserved for privileged white people. This was the 1970s. He said, my God, it was like a flashback. And that's, the book is a 100-year story, or nearly 100 years, about 80 years, story about the Filipino American labor activist history. In this case, Ward's Cove v. Packing v. Antonio, the court ruled 5-4 against the Filipino and Native workers who were challenging discrimination, segregation, race and class domination in the Alaskan canneries. The position of the majority was so outrageous that Justices Stevens and Harry Blackmun wrote biting dissents to the white majority. That is the white majority opinion by Byron White, but I refer to it as the white majority. And what they said was that the cannery in the 1970s resembled an old plantation economy model, a model that was really built around settler capitalism and racially segregated workplaces, especially in slavery. He said this is an old-fashioned sort of discrimination. It's not the modern discrimination that's subtle and clever and doesn't announce itself. This is just overt and explicit. And Justice Blackmun says, I wonder whether the majority still believes that race discrimination is a problem or even remembers that it ever was. Tyree Scott, who I will say a few things about in a few moments, and my guess is a lot of you know who Tyree was, who's an ally of Filipino labor activists in the 70s, said the Ward's Cove case is really the death throes to the '64 Civil Rights Act in terms of employment, which is to say that it was a very significant case in the most tragic kind of way, because not only had Filipino labor activists, but women and African-American workers had all used the terms of the 1964 Civil Rights Act to challenge rampant continued discrimination and segregation in workplaces. And in many ways, this, what the Supreme Court ruled in this case, killed off or significantly narrowed the capacity to mobilize the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And part of our motive in this book is to document how this judicial rebuff, this conservative judicial majority, continued many decades of legal oppression and subjugation of Filipino American workers. In many ways, the book sort of took its cues from the great writer, the literary chronicler of the Filipino American labor experience, Carlos Bulosan. On one hand, Bulosan argued that American law is a nightmare. He said he documents how Filipino migrant workers in the first generations in the 20s and 30s and 40s have been criminalized, subjected to brutal repression by state capitalist owners, white society for many decades, explicitly through law and indirectly through practices that law authorized. Bulosan, I feel like a criminal running away from a crime I did not commit. This crime is that I'm a Filipino in America. Oops, I left out. It should be in America. And this criminalization, of course, is a common practice of racialization, of exclusion, domination, and subjugation in American history. But Bulosan also saw that American law as an aspirational American egalitarian dream and the dream of rights, of equality and rights for everybody. He wrote that America is not a land of one race or one class of men. America is in the hearts of men that died for freedom. It is also in the eyes of men that are building a new world. America is a prophecy of a new society of men, of a system that knows no sorrow or strife or suffering. That was from his classic, America is in the Heart. In the book, we draw a lot on Bulosan, especially in the first generation from the 20s through the 1950s, when Bulosan was working with unions and workers and writing about them and for them. The goal of the book is to understand the broader significance of the Ward's Cove case in a 75 history of US migrant labor struggles with racial capitalism. The concept of racial capitalism, which underlines the intersection of racial and class hierarchy that has structured American settler colonialism, is a significant part of the book that tries to make sense of the character of struggles. The book documents scores or maybe even hundreds of struggles, rights-based episodes by Filipino migrant workers struggling for basic rights. Rights to own and lease property, rights to engage in marriage with anyone that they want, rights to claim citizenship, a whole variety of different kinds of rights, rights to vote and participate in politics. And we document all of these various kinds of struggles. And we do this through what a lot of my work is called a legal mobilization framework. But this time, somewhat new to my own work, is socio-historical methodology. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that means. And these are just some classic works from legal mobilization framework, including my book there, Rights at Work. What we argue is about the radicalized politics of rights that Filipino American labor activists engaged in. And there's a variety of characteristics for all of these struggles. First, most were Filipino-led, which is to say that Filipino labor American activists were not the only ones acting, they were acting in concert with others. But what was really interesting was that they were always committed to multiracial ethnic class alliance. From the very beginning, almost every struggle for different kinds of rights was in alliance with African Americans, with Native Americans, with Mexicans, with other Asian Americans. And the basic logic of this was that racial capitalism itself was an intersectional history of subjugation, that race and class were intertwined as a sort of dual pillars of American society, and that required fighting through alliances that are multi-racial class alliances and intersectional politics. And we try and document that throughout the book. And it's pretty stunning, actually, to me. I'm actually writing a paper right now precisely about this part of the story, just about how committed all these activists were to multiracial class alliances. Now, they weren't always successful. They weren't always easy. There was lots of tensions, and sometimes they fell apart. But nevertheless, it was a fundamental commitment that was really quite dramatic and palpable. The second point was that labor unions played a very important role. From the late 1920s to the 1930s, Filipino labor activists were always committed to trying to organize in unions. And they organized into and with a variety of unions from the late 20s through the 1950s, through the early 1950s, when they finally allied with the ILWU, the Longshore Workers, and allied with Harry Bridges, probably the most important labor leader in the 20th century. And unions were very critical. Unions were not just, the image of what we have of interest groups and of business unions, but they were support networks. They were imbricated in the communities of Filipinos. They provided all kinds of community and mutual aid supports, and they became hubs of activism. We don't talk about the history of Filipino American labor activists as a social movement, but rather as a catalyst to lots of different social movements at different periods of time. And in that regard, we talk about the union as social movement unionism, is a particular kind of unionism that was committed to broad transformation in a democratic, egalitarian, participatory, and socialist direction. These various struggles also reflected particular kinds of tactics. In many of these, but not all of them, litigation became part of the struggle, filing lawsuits, many of them very defensive, fighting for security, fighting for entitlements that were being undermined by the dominant white society. But they integrated those always from the very beginning with a whole variety of other organizational activities, protests, strikes, media campaigns, legislative lobbying, voting. They engaged at every point in multi-dimensional types of strategies that employed lots of different tactics in a very dialectic and dynamic kind of way. And again, this is very creative activism. I've written about this kind of politics all of my academic career, and I had to write this book because this was some of the most stunning examples of this kind of rights mobilization politics. And then finally, we emphasize what we call pervasive rights claiming was radicalized. So rights radicalism is what we call it. And it's partly because American liberal rights were often mobilized in the service of radical transformative ends, so that the rights claims themselves weren't necessarily all that radical. They were pushing the envelope a lot, pushing the boundaries of American liberal tradition, but they were often to facilitate the organizing strategies for democratic socialist transformation. But along the way, a lot of times the rights claims themselves became quite radicalized, became direct critiques of American liberal rights traditions. And in particular, embracing what later became known after the 1940s, socioeconomic human rights to advance a socialist, anti-racist, anti-imperialist agenda. And again, this is quite stunning because Filipino labor activists were mobilizing the claim of human rights as socioeconomic rights as early as the 1920s and 1930s, long before the international conventions of human rights developed. And again, we try and underline where we think that those traditions or the sources of those radical rights claims developed. So I'll give an example. Again, the story, there's really two generations to some degree. There's a generation of the 20s through the 50s, and then there's a rebirth of radical labor activism from the late 1960s, early 1970s through the 1980s. Well, I'll give an example from the 1970s about what sort of rights radicalization looks like. In the early 1970s, a group of activists came together and formed LILO, which Cindy had just mentioned a moment ago, but the original LILO originally stood for Labor and Employment Law Office, the Northwest Labor and Employment Law Office, LILO. And it was created by the Cannery Workers Association, Alaskan Cannery Workers Association, the United Farm Workers and United Construction Workers Association that was led by Tyree Scott. And the whole goal was to create a workers' law firm. Now, in the 1960s and 1970s, lots of groups that were pushing for civil rights change formed public interest associations and public interest law firms. But these were mostly associations of fairly conventional lawyers that were advocating the causes for those who have been discriminated against and segregated and abused. But the vision for LILO was really to create a workers' law firm, a law firm that worked for the workers and executed the designs and the tactics and the strategies of the workers themselves. As Nemesio Domingo Jr. Put it, Tyree, and here's Tyree Scott down in the right-hand corner, becomes a very important leader in the 1970s. So Tyree was saying we need to form our own law office because we cannot depend on the goodwill of the government to pursue equal opportunity, particularly for workers. And so workers needed to be really in control. There was a basic understanding that the 1964 Civil Rights Act was not self-implementing, that it actually was to be implemented by a very weak, toothless tiger of an organization, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and that it needed to be supplemented by organizing on the ground, which included litigation, but also included the kinds of tactics I talked about: protests, media tactics, lobbying, voting, and so forth. Here's Selmy Domingo, who I'll say more about. This is Cindy's brother. And this was one of the attorneys that began with LILO, Michael Fox. And they developed a strategy for the Alaskan Cannery Workers Association, which is sort of a rebel group within ILWU 37 that was independent of that was trying to produce change on many levels. And they filed 3 lawsuits, 3 Title VII civil rights litigation lawsuits challenging discrimination and segregation in the workplace. One of those went on to become the Ward's Cove case. And the 3 lawsuits were not just about trying to change the organization of work in the salmon canneries. They had other goals in mind. That litigating was seen as a political strategy, was an effort to mobilize on a variety of different fronts. Again, to mobilize different groups, multiracial, and also, and at this point, women's rights as well, around a variety of different goals. One of those goals was not just to reform the workplace, to reduce the levels of inequality and hierarchy, but to take over the union that had been, whose leadership had lost the sort of radical democratic commitments of the earlier period, to take over the union and make it a truly democratic, participatory, and transformative organization. Secondly was the larger project of promoting democratic socialist change, both in the Philippines and in the US, and specifically in in and around the Puget Sound and up and down the West Coast. And then finally, and very important, was removing President Marcos in the Philippines, who was seen as a despot, who was not only undemocratic, but was ruthless and violent and murderous. Those are just three of the many kinds of political goals that were behind the lawsuits and for which the lawsuits were used. And again, this commitment to a kind of multi-racial, multi-ethnic coalition around a whole variety of related issues, in some ways capsulated by what Tyree Scott called no separate peace. His point was repeatedly that we can't just fight on one front, we have to fight and take on the whole structure of racial capitalism. The class, racial, gender, inequality, imperialism, all of those have to be fought at once. And if you just take on one, it's not going to really achieve change. On the cost, when two of the lawsuits went to court and they both won or settled, which was very empowering to the workers, tragedy struck. In 1981, Selby Domingo and Jean Vernes were murdered. They were in their office just right after elections when Jean Vernes was elected to be dispatcher, a very important, powerful position within the union, and several men came in and shot them dead. From the very beginning, the local press and the local prosecutors treated this as a sort of an act of street thugs. They were engaged in fighting with the new leaders. But from the very beginning, their allies, including Cindy and the others, and Emma and others, formed a committee for justice for Domingo and Viernes, and were committed to demonstrating that these murders were an organized conspiracy, organized by the former union boss, who hired thugs to commit the murder. They were funded by Ferdinand Marcos, and all of this with the at least indirect, if not direct, complicity of the US government. And all this led to three events in 1989, which comprise the last two chapters of the book. So I'm almost done here. One is that Ferdinand Marcos was pushed out. He had to leave office and he went to Hawaii, which actually made him vulnerable to a lawsuit, an alien tort suit for his misdeeds and his violent, the murders and usurpation. Secondly, the activists behind the committee for 8 years fought to challenge the narrow legal criminal prosecution, arguing again that this was a conspiracy. It wasn't just ordinary street crime, wasn't just a kind of street crime that's typical of Filipino immigrants, but in fact was a political assassination. And over time, 1989, they won the lawsuit and demonstrated that in fact Marcos had been complicit and the US government had been complicit as well. And then finally, it's in 1989 also that the Supreme Court decided the third Title VII case. The case identical to the two previous cases that had won in court and then had settled for the workers. The court seized upon this third case quite surprisingly to hand down its ruling that killed civil rights law, as Tyree Scott put it. Throughout all this, our point is to really understand how law becomes a site or a terrain of contestation. From the very beginning, law was a resource for dominant white society and for capitalist employers to dominate the workers, to subjugate the workers, and to subject them to oppressive conditions. But law also became a resource for challenging those conditions of hierarchy, exclusion, and oppression as well. I just put three pictures up here. This is not what I usually in the talk, but you can see this is several. We have Emma and actually Cindy, several others who were at the funeral for Selmy and Jean from the very beginning, and the lamenting and great grief for what happened. Secondly, the second point here, this is Elaine Coe, who is laying out the strategy or the theory to demonstrate that this was not just street crime, but this was actually a political assassination. And here in triumph and winning in court is Cindy Domingo, Terry Mast, and Mike Withey, who was the attorney who led that case. And so again, it's a complex story about law. Law is both a source of oppression and hierarchy, but it's also a resource that sometimes can be useful for challenging those hierarchy and injustice. Although this is a book where there's probably more tragedy than there is triumph, but what we really want to show is the aspirational struggle to use rights claims to advance the causes of social justice and increase democratic organization of American society. I'll finish with just a quote from Tyree Scott and Cindy Domingo in a letter that they wrote to their attorney. They said, "We recognize we have a different view of law from yours. We see law as a set of rules that exist as a result of a tug of war, which is constant between the class that rules and those democratic forces that are ruled. During this ongoing war, both of these forces make gains and losses. We see the law as something that is neither morally right nor stagnant. At any given time, law, in our view, reflects the relative strengths and weaknesses of its opponents and proponents." It's a very clear-eyed, critical, but I don't think quite cynical view of law, and we try and demonstrate that in our long history. And here are just some of the people that are involved in our story from the later period. You've seen some of these. There's Cindy and there's Mike Withy and all that. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. You know, it's when you're part of making history, it's unbelievable that somebody can encapsulize in 20 minutes almost 100 years of history and the complexity of struggles and tactics, and especially the bold vision that our movement had in terms of fighting for civil and human rights. So, I mean, I think that that's why this book is so important, because you can find all this information in one book. Otherwise, you would have to go to several places to find the full trajectory of this history and the stories and the people that made this history. So again, once again, thank you to Michael, and thank you for that presentation and your PowerPoint. It was very clarifying to hear that. Our next speaker is Emma Catague. And I just want to also add before Emma comes on that if people have questions that you think about during the course of this webinar, please put them in the chat, and we can take them later in discussion. So Emma Catague, she is a reflection of how important women were in the important role that women played in the struggle for civil rights and human rights in the cannery struggle. Emma is a longtime comrade who immigrated to this country in the 1970s, and she was a recent immigrant when she decided to go to the canneries to work and become a member of Local 37, the Cannery Workers Union, and then became a member of the reform movement with so many other young women who worked in the egg house and other parts in the cannery. Emma also became a leader in the anti-dictatorship movement. And as Michael talked about the intersections of all these movements, she became a leader in the anti-dictatorship movement and continues to be active in the Philippine Solidarity Movement, and eventually also helped organize workers at what was, I think, known as Providence Hospital in the central area, which is now part of Swedish Hospital. Emma continues to be active in the Filipino community as the program manager at the Filipino Community Center in Seattle. And she can always be depended upon to take up the various different issues and struggles that impact Filipinos in this country and in this region. So please, Emma. You're on mute, Emma.
Sorry. Hi, this is Emma. As Cindy said, I've been involved in the early 70s all the way up to now. And I will share with you my experience working in the canneries, but also being involved very closely with Selmy Indian as part of the Local 37. So Cindy mentioned, I arrived here in 1974 as a newly immigrant. When I left the Philippines, it was under Marcos dictatorship. It's martial law. So I really don't have any idea what's happening in here, where I was not involved in the political aspect in the Philippines that time. But when I arrived here, I got introduced through my husband that time to KDP because he is also a member of KDP. And my first job that I have is working in Providence Hospital in the dietary department. And because of that, I was approached to help organize the housekeeping department. So I was able to talk to a lot of the Filipinos and provide them the information about how to become a member of the union and why is it important to have a union. And that actually is very successful because we won, they won, so they become a union. And with that, it continued by I guess I will say, really, Selmy has a very have a lot of influence on me because he's the kind of person that will not stop if he sees something on you. So he keep pushing me and doing something. And as Cindy said, I was involved in the anti-Marcos movement here, and I'm one of the co-chair at that time, and tried to recruit people in the community. And also, because of I'm a newly immigrant, I was able to access to the Filipino community, and I become sort of the in between the KDP, anti-Marcos movement, and the community to understand, our struggle about it and trying to, provide information in the community. And that time it was kind of difficult because first of all, most of the leaders in the Filipino community that time is pro Marcos. So you can see where we're coming from. We are not invited. We're not, being, welcome in there. But through the years, we continue the work that we do until the time that we were able to be, acknowledged. So I was also asked by Selmy to go up in Alaska. And I was in 77, 78, I think. And just to see the condition in the canneries. So, well, I'm kind of excited because first I never been in Alaska. So I would like to see that. Second is it's looked like it's kind of exciting to work in the canneries because I never have any experience doing that. And I heard a lot from the Mano Alascaros like, oh, it's easy money. It's easy money, you go up there. And so I'm like wondering what it means. So I decided to go up in Alaska and try to see that. And the canneries that I went actually is in Igigik, and they call it Diamond E Fisheries, Igigik, Alaska. And Lynn Domingo and actually Mano Minicio Domingo is with me. So we were sort of like, the crew on that time. And then the funny thing is, before I went up to Alaska, I didn't know that I was pregnant to my first, first child. And my husband that time also is a Lascaro, so he actually told me not to go because of that. He knows how hard is the condition, but I think I was sort of more challenged in terms of understanding it as a newly immigrant, as a woman, and really experiencing some of the discrimination already working at the Providence Hospital when people look at me and say, speak English, speak, like go back where you belong because, you have accent and all that. So, when I get into canneries, I see what is the condition, the discrepancy between us, people of color or women, immigrants, and white people. They have a better bunkhouse where they have a better food. Ours is really basically, it's interesting because we can do the canning of the salmon, but at the same time we eat the same thing. So I always complain about it, like, what is this? We're working we're putting this fish in the can, and then at the same time, at the end, like lunch and dinner, we still have the same thing. So I said, it's just too much for me to have fish, 24/7. And the other thing also is we experience a lot of the Filipinos there, and a lot of the women's immigrants really was not given a better opportunity of the work that we do. Like some of the women, white women, sometimes they are in the egg house, which is a better one. For us, we always have on the patching table, which patching table is basically when the can, fill up with the salmon, it goes through us to either, if there's sticking bone, you have to cut it. If that enough, then you have to patch it. You have to put something else before they close it. And it's really a hard work, because after 5 seconds or 5 minutes, your eyes get crossed out and everybody is just looking at the same can, and you're standing there for like 8 hours, 10 hours. So knowing that, I start talking to a lot of other, Filipinos, saying, what you guys think about it? This is not right. So I start speaking out, and some of the people in there telling me, you better be careful, you should not be doing that or saying that. And I think at the end of that, because I realized that it's hard work, when I talking to a lot of the manons, when they say easy money, I said, this is not an easy money. This is a hard money, because when you're working 12 to 14 hours every day, you go crazy. You lack of sleep, you can't comprehend, because, they wake you up, at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning and start working in the canneries. And it's just so, there's a lot of accidents happening in there. So I think because of my condition, working 14 hours a day, it was not good for me. And I starting to affect me because, as I said, I was pregnant at that time. And so I decided to go back home early. So the season is about 2-3 months. That's why a lot of men are saying it's easy money, because you only work for 2 to 3 months and you get a bulk of money that you can spend in the next 6 months of your time in Seattle. So what happened is, so I went back in Seattle, and then when the season finished, I was asked by Selmy, saying, Emma, I think we want you to consider to be part of the reform movement, and to do that, we want you to actually run for a position in the local 37. And the position that was put to me is being a trustee. And again, the whole local 37 that time, the leadership is all men. There's no woman in that. And so it was a shocking, because I was actually got elected by the membership. And so I was the first Filipino woman got into that. And so it's me, Selmy, and Jean, and Jen Hatton. We are sort of the outsider, within that all old men. Yeah. And so when I got inducted and starting going to the meeting, of course, the secretary kept calling everybody, Brother Domingo, Brother Baruso, da. And when it comes to me, he called me Brother Catague. And because, and so that time Baruso said, Brother Torres, we have a sister here, his sister Catague. But he kept mentioning, he kept doing that. And I just say, wait a minute, what is this? I said, do you guys really realize that there is a woman in here? You don't recognize me? And so sometimes they laugh, but that's the experience that I have being there. So with that, I also feeling like I need to do something about it, because I feel like they are discriminating women and not trying to hear for them, for us. And so that's the experience that I have being in, like in the canneries, but being involved in the union. I had an opportunity to work very closely with Selmy Indian. Selmy, I've known Selmy since pretty much, when I met my husband in 77, because they are very good friends, but also they're comrades in the KDP. And also Selmy is the godfather of my oldest daughter. So, we're very close as a family. And I look up to him because he really like a mentor to me. He provide me all the, like he always, he sees something on me that I can be a strong advocate or activist. And I kind of take that. So Selmy always provide me that kind of support. But also there's times that we always butt head, because he always told me like, Emma, I want you to go to the community and see what's going on. And we want to go in there and put flyers about Marcos movement and all that. And I told him, I said, you got to understand, most of the people in the Filipino community is pro Marcos. They're not going to like what it is. The other thing also is they have this perception about you guys as because that time in the 70s or early 80s, hippie, like I will just want to describe Selmy in a way that why the perception of the Filipino, the immigrants is different. They have certain way. So you have like Selmy that time, and not just Selmy, but some of the KDP's members, including my husband that time. So Selmy have a afro hair, wearing leather jacket, driving Monte Carlo, have a platform shoes and belt button, pants. And so this is what I got from this community, and saying, well, why would we believe on them? Look at them. So I always tell, Selmy, like, yeah, Selmy, but they will not believe on you because the way you guys, present yourself. And so I think that's sort of like, the cultural aspect of being immigrants versus American born. Really, that differences. And I was the one in between of that. But with that also, it was I think a process that understanding both ends. And so when we were part of the reform, one of the things that I also understand is to change the environment, but also how our union conduct. And so with that, working with Selmy and Jean, I get to know them very well, especially also with Jean, because Jean is a very quiet person, very serious. She really just focuses on what he's doing. But at the same time, I see the other side of Jean being very, gentle, very serious about understanding what's going on in the Philippines, because that time he was also going to the Philippines. So he wants to know how he acts when he gets there. And I basically told him, be yourself, everybody speak English, so don't worry about it. But at the same time, I think it's also helped sort of understanding about immigrants, about people, about the difference of the culture, even though we're all Filipinos. And working with both of them is really helped me to shape who I am in terms of understanding why is it important to be a strong advocate for causes, like human rights, immigrants' rights. As a newly immigrant coming from the Philippines, I really don't have that kind of understanding why, because back home, we basically, like everybody is the same, but also there's a lot of internal oppression uh, being under the colonization for a long time. So our perception of white people and black people in the Philippines is so different. So when I come in here, that's one of the things that helped me to shape who I am because of the work that I do in the community uh, and the early on with Selmy and Jean being there with us, and also other people around us. And so I know the other thing also is when they were killed, it was so hard for us, not just for me, but for people that is involved in the union. All of a sudden, we lost the person that we look up to, we depend on, and we have to move on. We have to carry everything that they, would like us to do. And when that happened, I felt really guilty because that day I'm supposed to meet with Selmy. We were supposed to be talking about the election from the national, and I was one of the person that he chose to be involved in that, and I missed that. And because of that, I didn't get a chance to see him, but also maybe it's a fate that I missed that because that will happen. So I keep it to myself that I have to continue the work that we do, and reminded me that what happened to Selmy and Jin is really an open eyes also for me as a woman, because I feel that they give me the respect and to push me to who I am. So every day in my life, I always when I'm feeling down, I always think about Selmy, and as I said, he's very close to us, my family, because he always come to our house, being my daughter godfather. I mean, a week before he was killed, he came to our house 11 o'clock at night. I mean, it's so, we were shocked, and, we opened like, what the hell are you doing here? Do you know that this is like midnight, and you're still, and he was just, how he is. He always just laugh at you, like, oh, well, I just want to have chance to talk to you guys and all that. So it's very unusual, but that was the last time that we saw him before he passed. But I think it's just a way of letting us know. So every day, it's really, whenever I doing my work, it always remind me of Selmy, and also for Jean, because the work as a farm workers, as people in that time, and I guess one thing that I really want to push also, that I did push, is when I get involved in the Filipino community, people who are involved in the community in the last 20-25 years really don't have a clue the work that we've done, the support that we get, that the Filipino community get, the support from the union, the cannery workers. I keep reminding them that, do you guys know that all the members of the Filipino community provide or give money to this building so that we can pay this? And I keep reminding them to that, because a lot of them, they really don't have the history. Why is it important? Why is it critical for us to continue the struggle, or to continue to remind ourselves that these two person died in vain, and because of that, they want to change something for the betterment of our community. And so I think 10 years ago, when McCann became the president of the Filipino community, we did something that never been done in the community. part of our anniversary. Can't remember what it is, but we push it to the point that they have to recognize the Alaskeros, the what they've done to the community. And we actually invited all the living, Alaskeros to be acknowledged on our gala. And that was really, to me, it's really makes me so proud that finally, here we are recognizing these two people that did a lot for our community through the union, because a lot of these Alaskeros that is a member of the community also. And Cindy knows this also, that now that we have the Filipino Community Village, the senior affordable housing, one of the things that we push also is to have a community rooms that is named by, it's Selmy, Domingo, Jen Birnes, and Bob Santos. And so people that be living on this building will have the opportunity to use that community room for the gathering. And so I feel like this is something that our connection with the Filipino community and will continue as long as we're there to really strongly advocate for workers. And I think that's, I don't know how much time I have, but I can go on and on, but I will stop.
Thank you, Emma.
Yes.
Thank you, Emma. Originally, Emma was reticent about speaking because she said, what would she talk about? And as you can see, this story of the cannery workers has had a lifelong impact on her, and one that's very emotional. But as you can see, one of the things that our movement did was uplift the leadership of women. And so many of our leaders today came out of the cannery workers struggle. Emily Van Bronckhorst, who is on here, Terry Mast, who became the first female president of the Alaska Cannery Workers, and of course Emma. And there are many other women that participated and led in the struggle. So thank you, Emma. Our next speaker is Mario Vergara. And Mario started off as a cannery worker, then became the dispatcher, and is now recently become the regional director of Region 37 Inlandboatmen Union. Region 37 is the name of the Alaska Cannery Workers Union, and the Inlandboatmen Union is the Marine division of the ILWU. He's also a leader in the Seattle Asian Pacific American Labor Alliance. And so I'm very glad to welcome him here tonight to talk about his own experience, as well as what is happening with Region 37. So as Michael said, we're covering a lot of decades of history here. And so Michael started off with the beginnings of the Cannery Workers Union, and now we end with Mario Vergara before we go into Q&A. Please, Mario.
Wow. Thank you, Cindy. My name is Mario Vergara. I'm the regional director of Region 37. I didn't really celebrate myself as a regional director because there's some things that happened, so I didn't really accept myself as a regional director until just recently. Anyways, we'll go back. I just wanted to summarize what everyone talked about, especially with Cindy. Yes, Alaska workers, canneries has been around since the 20s. We've had people that's been, especially the Filipino Americans, been working there since the 20s. And then by the time the 30s comes, there's about a few thousands of Filipino workers keeps going back and forth in Alaska. So by 1976, there was still approximately over 1,000 to 100 people there, and that's when they started calling them Alaskeros. So I would consider myself Alaskeros because I put in about 15 years in Alaska, and it was really hard. And then the only thing that Emma said there was 10 hours work, 12 hours. It's actually harder than that. And I know you've experienced that. I've seen guys working 32 hours straight, and they were sleeping on some of those sorting areas on the side. Next to the bloody fish, all that stuff. And it was really, really hard. And then at the end of the day, And the bad thing about it, there's times that you would come home and you're really tired and you're hungry, and the only thing they serve you is the very same thing that you work with. And it's like working in the candy store. It's like you work with those products all day long and looking at it. At the end of the day, you get tired of looking at it and let alone eating it. And it was really, really bad. I mean, I was really bad. I was a postal employee, U.S. postal employee prior to that. And to me, it was like a challenge too, like Emma said, and it was a challenge to me. I came here 1974, like Emma, during the martial law, and I've worked through so many different places. It was like, to me, when I get bored, I challenge myself, and this was a challenge. My brother-in-law and my friends that work for the cannery that said, "You're not going to last there 1 week." But here we go. 15 years later, I was still there. So, anyways, unlike you, Emma, I didn't get the privilege of working with the two of the best, Selmy Domingo and June Viernes. Unfortunately, they were both best in what they do, which is, union activists, both in labor and human rights movements. And then the part that I like about being part of the union now is, I had a mission. I started having a mission on my first 2 years. I mean, on my second year at the cannery, because of the fact I just found out that, I didn't know we had a union. So Isagani Angeles started really encouraging me to take over the union representative when he's gone. So I started doing that. I was really active, and I didn't care. I was the kind of guy who tells the management, "Hey, I don't really. I mean, not in so many nice ways. I don't really care. I got nothing to lose. You think I'm gonna be afraid to lose my job, my $7 and $25 an hour job, when I just gave up a $26 an hour job? No way. I'm doing this because." I know you guys are doing it wrong. I mean, I'm just trying to protect people's rights, especially these are human beings. So back in those days, it was really, really hard. So I had to learn the ins and out of the company. So I had to become part management and then part production. So that's the only way I can learn and try to somewhat spy on these people, on how they treat them and how they get a way of treating how they treat these people, these poor people. They take advantage of their simplicity. And these people that I work in, they became my friend, my family. I'm still connected with them as part of my brothers and sisters. Some of them I've known for 17 years, 20 years. Now they're still up there working. I wouldn't even know if I would be able to go back there and work as a cannery worker. I mean, from the experience that I've been. So now I'm trying to do the best I can to protect these people. So recently, change all that. I mean, we've summarized all these things about the Lasqueros, they're back in the 20s and the 30s with Emma working, as a female. I'm sure it was harder for her back then. So I started in 2003 as a cannery worker. And 2004, I started being a union representative. And then 2017, at the end of 2017, that's when I took over a business agent. All these things you are voted for what you do. They recognize you for something you're doing, you're not afraid of doing. So 2020, I became a director, but unfortunately, it was a bad time for me to take over because we have a new company that didn't want to recognize the union. So we had to fight them. We had to had some legal battles with that company in order for us to be recognized. So we compiled all the evidence, all the affidavit of the employees. These people are afraid. And the only thing that saved me from encouraging them to do this is because of my relationship with them. Otherwise, we would have lost the union. So now we are in the process of getting our first contract negotiated pretty soon, within a month or so. So this is a good thing for it. It's like a light in the tunnel, you know. With this thing, this new era that we're into, with the H-2Bs coming in, you know, because there's not enough cannery workers that want to work here in the U.S. domestically, because of first of all, it's the salary. So that's the one thing that I'm going to try to work with these companies, with the wage increase. I think that's the first thing we need to do. The wage increase, to just encourage people, especially the domestic workers, to work back in the cannery business. And then with this pandemic, and you know, the certain things that we need to work with all the, especially with the Filipinos. I'd like to bring back the Filipinos and the Hispanic and the domestic workers back in the cannery business. Is because there's overwhelming amount of European Jamaicans that are working on the cannery. It's not the same. And the cannery, I know that a lot of Filipino Americans wants to go back, but they want to bring back the old canneries. You know, they're having fun and then making money and all that stuff. So that's we have a big plans ahead of us, especially me. You know, I mean, I've been through the battles fighting this company who hired an agency that's 98% successful rate in union busting. So they gave the only mistake they gave me was they gave me that 2%. So that's the biggest mistake. They gave me that hole that, you know, that gave me an opportunity to say, look, I got nothing to lose but a lot to gain. So I took that and used as much knowledge as I can that I picked up from Richard Gertiza, you know, and with the help of everybody else, and the ILWU, the legal councils, which is 2 legal councils, and John Breyer. With their help, we successfully finally got recognized by this new company. And out of all the days in the world, you know, it's like Friday the 13th. This happened. I got a news from one of our organizers, which is John Breyer, that the lawyer just has received the letter, getting recognition from the company, from the new Peter Pan company. So with that, you know, I mean, bringing back the past, and I'm looking at it. I've been, you know, I didn't know anything about back then about Silman, Domingo. I've worked for the Postal Service. I worked for the real estate. I was a loan officer. I worked for the construction field, and I know nothing about canneries, let alone with Gene and Silme and Larry Idleongs. And, you know, I knew Cesar Chavez. So I started watching all the movies and trying to summarize the books, however much I could learn. But, you know, so I use that as a tool to try to pretend to educate people that, hey, we need to bring this back. We need to bring back what they fought for. And I mean, they died for this thing. So, I mean, it's only right for us to keep this thing going, you know, I mean, especially with, you know, with the Asian, the Filipino Americans and all that stuff. So my plan is, I mean, yeah, Emma, I've worked for EEG. Well, that was the worst place I've worked for. 2004, I worked there for, that's when they shut it down. Actually, I was part of the people that had him shut down because of the fact that they were bouncing checks. So I started reporting them to the U.S. Labor Department. So that's when I started going, okay, I'm gonna start organizing. That's when I thought about, I said, well, I guess it's partially organizing. So, because I told these people, do not allow these people to promise you something that they will never do. You know, they're trying to buy you out and sell you out. So back in, you know, they've been doing that since 98. They were trying to cheat people out of their money, bounce check, while they're having their $3 million home built. in California. So I did all that research. I went to their house and knocked on their door. I said, hey, look, you got to pay these people. So the labor department, the Alaska Labor Department was giving these people, about a tech page of something to fill out. I mean, some of these people are even no read, no write. I mean, let alone have filled this out. So I went directly to the U.S. Labor Department and just made it simple. Anyways, that's when I would just bring that up because, bringing the past, I mean, it's really, really hard. And this is why I got into the union, the organizing. And like I said, we have big plans. We are going to reconstruct my region. It is my region. It's Region 37. We're going to make these people happy. We're going to bring back a fair day's work for a fair day's pay, protecting their job security, especially with their safety, health and safety, educate them about the previous union history, and then organize all over. We're going to organize one step at a time. We've already got those places in place, and we've already trying to plan out our strategy, and we're not going to stop. This is my first successful event was to really get recognized as union, which we almost lost. This was a hopeless case, people. Region 37 was going to be out of the system. I mean, back in the, I think 30 years ago or a little more, I know I was reading the history of the Region 37. They had over 2,000. They had over 2,000 members. I'm sure, Emma, you know that. When I got in here, they had less. They had probably had 800, barely hanging in there, and they had maybe 500 of that is H2Bs, meaning the European employees. So I walked into a mess. So I had to reorganize that mess and reconstruct. So now everybody's trying to push Region 37 away and saying this is a hopeless case. So right now I told him, let me try to reconstruct this place. I got nothing to lose. That's the one thing I always say. I got nothing to lose and way a lot to gain. So I wasn't afraid of the 2% they gave me, 98% successful rate on union busing. That's okay. I'll take my 2% and gamble it. So now it's a good feeling to be successful in one thing. And then, you get bored. You need to get bored and move on. You say, okay, I was successful here. Now I got to move on. I got to reconstruct this thing and organize those plants that wants a union back. And there is an open sea out there where they need help. Because I hear people are calling me now, say, Mario, can let me help you organize this company. Let me help you do this for you. These are people, not actual people that are working for the company. So this is a good encouragement, tool that I can use to be successful. I'm a very simple person, I'm not a very educated guy. I'm a wise guy, and I'm a street smart, which Richard told me, Mario, you can outsmart me with your street smart than my 6 year in UW. I said, no, Richard, I'm trying to look up to you and trying to pick out your brain. With Cindy, these guys don't know, every time they talk to me, I pick up things. I'm sorry, Cindy, but that's what I do. I pick up I'm trying to dig out your intelligence and use that as a tool to be stronger. I mean, if I was as smart as anyone else up on that panel or where I'm at, I'd be a dangerous man. But right now, what I have is a simple people, which is with a simple need, common sense, and all they need is their simple needs, and that's what they want. They don't want to be recognized. They just want a little attention. They just want that little simple things that they need, and they just want that job protected. Their job, they want to be able to work every year in, year out, and they want to be guaranteed work that they can take home to their families at the end of the season. And that's what we're doing. These companies have money, and we need to teach this company how to spend that money so they can share it with the other people. 75% of their success come from the same people that they try to harass, underpaid, and not protected. So, and with that, like I said, I just summarized what Cindy said. Started out in the 1900s. I was going through this just recently, and I was reading this Alaska canneries, and every time I read through this, I try to put the most important things in my head. It's a challenge. You're right, Emma. This is a challenge. This is a very big challenge, and it's a fun challenge. And that's how you got to think about it. You can't stress yourself out. Let the people, let those big corporations stress out with you, because, like I said, I have nothing to lose, but I have a lot to gain. So 2% I will take over the 98%. And with this thing that we're going on right now with our new office, Cindy was just moved into that office. I said, I'll take any office. I don't care. I'll take the bathroom office. Well, but let me work. Let me give me a chance to bring back, reconstruct this region. And they're allowing me to do it. I'm glad they're allowing me to do that. And we're doing a good job. And and the good thing about it is all my members now, they feel alive. They're calling me. And the good thing you hear from you is like, hey, we are glad the union's back.
Thank you, Mario. They certainly have found the right leader to take over the union, and with your enthusiasm, but your class stand and your vision of once again reviving that union. And
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Right. And I think both you and Emma represent the kind of boldness that it took to continue that union and to turn it into a union that really works for workers' rights and their human rights and respect on the job. So we have like 10 minutes left. I want to save a few minutes at the end to make some announcements, but I don't know if anyone has a question. Alice Fong says, "You're on fire, Mario." And many people want to thank both you and Emma for your presentations that gave more life to Michael's.
Cindy, can I share?
Apollo taught me how to be fired up. I mean, I was in Texas and I was really a quiet guy, and they put me in a state as a co-host. You guys taught me how to fire up, and that's your fault. That's your problem.
Cindy, can I share one thing that I missed?
Go ahead.
So when I was asked to go up in Alaska with Rich Cortisa to do the union membership meeting, we went to one cannery, and I can't remember, it's somewhere in Juneau, I think Columbia Ward. So one thing that the workers told me is that they are so frustrated because they can get the gear that they need because it was so cold. They didn't give them enough gloves and everything. So I told them, I said, this is what you can do. I said, when all the fish come in, and I said, every one of you has to do it, not only few of you. I said, when the fish come in, what you need to do is walk out. But every one of you has to walk out and demand that you will not go back until such time that they give you what you need. And they did. And so they got what they want. So they told me that. But then I got scolded by Rich Cortisa. And I'm like, why? I said, isn't that what our job's supposed to be? And for me as a woman, telling the whole cannery workers, and they believe in me and they follow me. I said, what is up with you? So we have a little discussion, but to me, it's like, I was so proud of myself and like, yeah, this is what we're supposed to be doing, strongly, supporting what they need. So they get what they want. So I'm so happy about it. But then I was sad because But you know that because of my language, I always asked by the union to go up in Alaska. There's also another local 200 ILWU when the Valdez spill happened, and uh, they were asked me to go up in Korea to actually talk to all the Filipino that was impacted by the Valdez spill, because they don't have any representation. So I did what I can because, as Mario said, we're passionate about it. It's our people that is being impacted. And we have to figure out, we have to find a way to provide them the information they need so that they can fight for it. So I just want to share that's what keeps me going is when I see something that, can change the
Well,
Thank you, Emma. Before we've just got a few minutes more. And so before I go into announcements, I want to give the last opportunity to Michael McCann, if you have any closing words. Michael?
Yeah, I just want to say this has been humbling and inspiring to be a part of this whole event. To hear from Emma, just to make these, the personal dimensions of all of this and the inspiration from Selmy and Jean that continues to live and inspire activists, workers' rights activists, but activists in all kinds of dimensions. I think that's the thing that most struck me in doing research for the book, was just how many different terrains and fronts people are working on that were inspired by the long legacy of the 20th century, but especially from the 1970s. And it's good to hear from Mario about what's going on in the current period, carrying on the struggles. And that's what we try to tell in the story of the book, is that this is struggle, inspiring struggle that is endless, but is necessary. So thank you for being part of it.
Thank you. And if Andrew is still on, if you could, we really want to encourage people to buy Michael's book. It's University of Chicago website, and I think Andrew's going to repost where you can order the book. And I just have a couple of other announcements. So I want to invite you to attend the annual Harry Bridges Center Awards celebration that is on Tuesday, November 9th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. on Zoom again this year because of the pandemic. The keynote speaker is Kent Wong, co-founder and longtime leader in APALA, the director of the UCLA Labor Center, and co-author of a new book with Seattle APALA leader Tracy Lai, who was on here today, and others. And the name of the book is called Asian American Workers Rising, APALA's Struggle to Transform the Labor Movement. And Mario, attributes his eloquency to talk about the labor movement, and his vision comes from APALA. And so I think you'll find these stories in this book as a tribute to people like Mario and Emma. And you can go to the Harry Bridges Center website and register for that free event. And you'll also be exposed to the many awards and people that students and graduates who are doing work on labor history and labor economic struggles. It's really a very nice event, and I wouldn't miss it anytime. And Ligaya Domingo, my niece, usually presents the Domingo Fairness Scholarship as well. Secondly, this event was part of a series co-organized and hosted by UW Tacoma Labor Solidarity Project, as we talked about in the beginning. We hope you will join the Labor Solidarity Project for a weekly online seminar, such as this one, that adopts an intersectional approach while exploring the recent histories of the regional, national, and global labor movements. Each meeting features a presentation and discussion facilitated by a leading voice in mapping the trajectory of labor activism and scholarship. The next presentation will be on October 20th and features Jake Wilson, Ellen Reese, Jason Struna, and Katie Wilson, who will discuss the cost of free shipping, Amazon, and the global economy. Their work covers everything from organizing in the fulfillment center floor to analyzing the role choke point activism might play in disrupting the global supply chain. Obviously, this is a very timely topic and discussion, given that this is the home of Amazon. And so we hope you'll join then. And then also the preceding weekly discussions that the Labor Solidarity Project has on these different struggles. Lastly, Lilo and Apala. Lilo is, Michael explained who Lilo was, and so I hope you'll check out our website and our Facebook. Lilo is going to be having an event October 30th at the Filipino Community Center. We continue to partner with each other because of our long history, and you can go on our website. It's an event that will introduce you to the use of scooters and how low-income people can access those scooters. And then lastly, Apala also has a Facebook, and we're getting our website up. And we will be doing, I think in January, an event around the new book that Apala has launched. And Tracy Lai and hopefully Kent Wong will be speaking at that event. So I want to thank you again for coming tonight. Buy Michael's book. You will thoroughly enjoy it. As I said, it's the one place you can find this history all in one book. And it comes from the voices of the people that made that history. Thank you again to Alex Miller and Andrew Hedden for your work helping us put together as part of Filipino American History Month. And I want to close with my favorite quote from Frederick Douglass. And Frederick Douglass said, "In the struggle for justice, the only reward is the opportunity to be in the struggle. You can't expect that you're going to have it tomorrow. You just have to keep working on it." Right, Mario? And so while we never won
Right.
Woods Cove case, through that work and through this book, many had the opportunity to be involved in that struggle. And through this book, many more will have the opportunity to learn about the role that Filipinos will and continue to play in the struggle for civil and human rights. Thank you again to the speakers tonight, Mario Vergara, Emma Catague, Michael McCann, and all of you that have attended tonight. We hope to see you again. And please,
We're gonna keep the legacy alive.
right, baka baka. Thank you.